This is the comment from Arne Slot that has riled all Newcastle fans.
So obviously he's missed pre-season. Is it possible for a player to catch up? If he's missed a whole pre-season, how long will it take? Could it take weeks, months to get him fully fit to where he needs to be?
I don't think there's a rule that every single player has the same, but it also depends on what did he do when he didn't train with the team. What is the impact if you go to a new club as a big signing, so you cannot compare maybe a player that hasn't trained or played in pre-season at a smaller club than if you go to Liverpool.
How's it, everybody? Welcome back to another video. Me, the Fontainer. It's been a while, almost a month since my last video. Apologies for that. I've been unwell. I've had a couple of things go on at work, but I'm back to bring you Newcastle United updates. A month is a long time in football and a lot has happened. Let's start with the bad news, or the news which might have irritated some Newcastle fans. After Liverpool's victory in the Champions League this week against Frankfurt, they won 5-1. Arne Slot was asked about Alexander Isak's fitness, and he made this comment about Alexander Isak coming from a small club to a big club like Liverpool, and the fitness is always going to be more of a challenge where you have to play 2 games every week. Before anyone jumps on the bandwagon, and this is not the Alexander Isak podcast, but I do think it's only fair and right as a Newcastle fan to stand up for your club when some random bald manager starts accusing or insinuating that the fitness levels at Newcastle United are not at the level that Liverpool would expect from certain players. Let's just recall what happened. It wasn't Newcastle United who chose not to train Alexander Isak. It was Alexander Isak who decided that he didn't want to be part of Newcastle anymore due to broken promises. All of the fitness issues and concerns by Alexander Isak not being up to speed, and the British record transfer player that he is not hitting the ground running has got nothing to do with Newcastle's training levels. I would argue Newcastle's training regime is probably more hectic or more rigorous than Liverpool's. This is a desperate attempt at trying to find reasons for Isak's unbelievably poor start to his Liverpool career. Do we really care? No. We are more interested in Newcastle United. Whatever Isak and Slot are doing is completely up to them, but we will stand up for our club, especially when people are lying and making false claims. I also don't want to get into this big club, small club debate. It is an interesting one that we could maybe delve into in later videos. What does make a big club? Is it your finances? Is it your recent success? Is it the size of your stadium? Is it how many trophies you've won in X amount of years? A video for another day. But as I said at the start of the video, a month is a long time in football. Newcastle have played 5 games. They've won 3 and lost 2 of those games. To me, it's interesting to look back, because generally we do videos right after every single game, and we kind of focus on what went wrong and what went right in that particular game. But if you take a step back and you look at games over the last month, I know we've had an international break in between that as well, where Elliot Anderson has almost cemented his place in Thomas Tuchel's England World Cup squad as that defensive midfield pivot, pulling all the strings and just providing that cover for the back four. I am going to come on to the defensive midfielder role for Newcastle, because I think it is something where we might be caught short later on through the season, and I think in particular in the Brighton game we definitely missed that. So let's have a quick run through or recap of the results. As I said, this isn't just hot off the press. This is taking a step back, looking at the games over the last month, and we kick off with the 2-1 defeat against Arsenal. That was at home. Again, that last minute killer goal by Gabriel. The game started off fantastically with Nick Voltemade getting a brilliant headed goal, doing his classic celebration, and he's really hit the ground running for Newcastle. He's definitely helped transition the club with the loss of Alexander Isak and with the loss of Johan Wissa to injury before he's even kicked a ball in anger for Newcastle. Voltemade has been an absolute godsend. And it's been interesting how Newcastle have been able to accommodate a striker who plays so differently to the way that Isak and Wilson and Asula play. He is such a different type of striker to what we've had over the last couple of years. And it's so exciting because I think the guy can get so much better considering the really good start he's made already. But it was an absolute gut punch, this goal in the 96th minute from Gabriel. We really should have taken at least a point from the game. And it brought back memories of losing to Liverpool in the dying embers of the game. I think it was the 100th minute where the youngster scored that winning goal. But we then had the Champions League game against USG. And this was an interesting one because at the time, USG hadn't lost many games. I don't think anything at all. They were flying really high. And there's a little bit of nervousness because Newcastle hadn't really strung together real good performances and real good results. And Nick Voltemade again opening the scoring in the 17th minute. 2 penalties by Anthony Gordon. And Anthony Gordon and his form is something we do need to speak about in this video. But fantastic result, 4-0 away from home, getting us off the board in the Champions League. A real kind of positive booster away from home. And our away form has been absolutely dreadful, not just this season, but going back to last season as well. We then went to Nottingham Forest, and at the time they were absolutely all over the place with Ange Postecoglou, and we didn't know it at the time, but it was going to be one of his last games as a Nottingham Forest manager. It was an absolute dreadful stint for him as manager of Nottingham Forest. I don't know what they were thinking going away from Nuno's counter-attacking style to Ange's all or nothing, everybody gung-ho forward style. It was just too drastically different. Interesting now that they've gone with Sean Dyche, who is perceived to be a bit more of a pragmatic, negative counter-attacking manager. They've already won their first game in Europe, but a really nice home win just to back up that 4-0 win against USG in the week. Bruno with an absolute cracking goal with his right foot, finding the top bin. And then Nick Voltemade with one of the most unbelievable penalties that went viral in terms of how he just smashed that into the corner. There does seem to be a bit of rivalry going on at the moment between who Newcastle's penalty taker is going to be. Is it going to be Voltemade or is it going to be Anthony Gordon? Anyway, after the Nottingham Forest game, there was the international break where an ex-Newcastle homegrown talent, Elliot Anderson, ran the show for Thomas Tuchel's England, playing in the defensive midfielder role, just as that pivot kind of quarterback position, just being there, taking the ball off the central defense, kind of pinging the balls through, keeping possession, snuffing out counter-attacks, and it was almost the epitome of the performance and player that Newcastle needed in the next game they played, which was away at Brighton. Now, Brighton is a bit of a bogey team for Newcastle. We, for some or other reason, always tend to struggle at Brighton. And it was the same with the evergreen Danny Welbeck scoring 2 goals. We thought that we were going to maybe get away with a draw or possibly a win, but Danny Welbeck broke Newcastle's heart, scoring in the 84th minute. But when I watched the game, there was a position and a role and a player that Newcastle were crying out for, and that was the defensive midfielder. Now, as everybody knows, when they're on form, Tonali, Guimaraes and Joelinton are a formidable midfield trio, possibly, arguably, one of the best midfields in the Premier League. But in this game against Brighton, we were caught out so many times on the counter-attack, and that line between the midfield and the defence was huge and gaping. There were so many times where our centre-halves were tracking back, falling back, facing onward attackers with absolutely no one in front of them defending them. And it did get me thinking about how Elliot Anderson would have been the absolute perfect player for Newcastle in that game. There are a few rumours about Newcastle having a buyback clause in Elliot Anderson. That hasn't been confirmed anywhere. If for any reason it is true, I really do hope that he can come back to Newcastle. But that defensive midfielder role, I don't really know who was supposed to be playing it. Was it Joelinton or was it Guimaraes? They'd recently just been on international duty with Brazil. They travelled back from Asia. You know, that time difference and the time lag can sometimes take it out of players. I know they're not flying on economy, you know, they're flying first class and everything. And I feel it was the midfield that lost the game for us against Brighton. But a couple of days later, and this is the nature of Newcastle in the Champions League, very quickly after a defeat, you have the opportunity in a couple of days to make it right and fix things. And Eddie Howe certainly did that by playing Lewis Miley and Jacob Ramsey in the midfield, and it completely transformed the energy and the control Newcastle had of the game. But the man of the match was Anthony Gordon. I said we need to speak about him. His form for England was absolutely unbelievable. The guy's energy and tank is unbelievable. He kind of reminds me of a James Milner back at Liverpool or back at Man City, where they said he had something like 4 lungs in terms of how much the guy sprinted and how much ground he covered over a course of a game. Yes, there are occasions where the final pass or the final finish or the final touch does seem to be lacking, and I think that will come in time. But his form for England, translated back to Newcastle, specifically in the Brighton game, wasn't there. But boy oh boy, against Benfica did he bring it back. He absolutely ran the show. Voldemort again on fire. It's really a shame he didn't manage to get a goal. But that interplay between Gordon and Voldemort for Harvey Barnes' goal was just pure joy. I think it's Newcastle's best goal of the season so far. Let me know in the comments what you thought of that. But that was a real spark and a sign of where I think the chemistry between Voldemort and Anthony Gordon is starting to click. And it was like, okay, he's starting to realize what Voldemort is going to do with the ball if he gets it, and where Anthony Gordon needs to be once he's given it to Voldemort. Because there's no doubt Voldemort can find him. He loves coming deep. He already knows where his defenders are, and he can play that ball around the corner. And it was just, for me, an unbelievably great goal. But more importantly, another important 3 points in the Champions League. Yes, we win £1.8 million for every win in the Champions League. You get half that money. The teams share the money if they draw, and obviously if you lose, you get nothing aside from the TV money. Really important to get that winning feeling. And as I said, the midfield player Tonali didn't play. He was struck down with a bug or some flu or something that seems to be going around everywhere at the moment. We didn't even need to bring him off the bench. That was fantastic to see him on the sidelines. I saw him chatting to Graham Jones about the club. He really seems to be a student of the game. Even though he's not playing, he's still talking to the coaches and telling people about formations and look what this player is doing here and there. I absolutely love the guy. And whilst we're talking about Sandro Tonali, news came out this week that Sandro Tonali actually extended his contract with Newcastle for 1 extra year whilst he was serving his ban. It was almost a kind of gesture from Sandro Tonali to say, look, you signed me for X amount of years. I haven't been able to play this 1 year because of my own fault. Let me extend my contract by another year. And more importantly, Newcastle have the option of another year. So his current deal reportedly now ends in 2029, and we have the option to extend him to 2030. What hasn't been disclosed is whether or not that extension triggered any pay rise for Sandro Tonali. And this is going to be one of the first things in the in-tray for the club's new sporting director, Ross Wilson. I did mention a couple of weeks ago, or probably a month and a half ago, that he was likely going to be our sporting director. He was the sporting director at Nottingham Forest. Interestingly, on Ross Wilson, it wasn't him who activated this additional year contract with Sandro Tonali. It was actually Dan Cashworth, who left Newcastle for Man United and then got kicked out of Man United as well. He was the guy who actually made this arrangement with Sandro Tonali. And next on the list is going to be Sven Botman, Tino Livramento, and possibly there's talk about Bruno extending his contract as well, and about getting a bumper pay rise, possibly well north of 200k a week. So a nice little summary from Newcastle. The last couple of games, just to see where we've been coming and going. And I think it's also interesting just to have a look at the players who I think have come and gone through kind of good spells of form during this period. It's interesting to look at Nick Pope, for example, who, let's just admit it, is an unbelievable shot stopper. He's not great with his feet, but it doesn't seem to be a huge priority for Eddie Howe. It's not a Pep Guardiola tiki-taka must play our way out of the back. We've just seen Man United beat Liverpool by playing long balls as well. There's many different ways to skin a cat. If it's working and we are kind of winning, then there's absolutely no reason. But the issue that Nick Pope's going to come across is if for any reason he starts to dip in form or makes a bit of a howler, Aaron Ramsdale is going to be there. And I do think it's important he gets a bit of game time, maybe against Tottenham Hotspur in the Carabao Cup midweek. So let's have a look at the Premier League table as we head into the Fulham game. Newcastle not sitting pretty in 14th place. I know we're only 8 games in. 1 or 2 or 3 victories back to back can really bump you up the league at this very early stage of the Premier League. But I don't ever want to see Newcastle at the bottom half of the table. And in particular, when I was watching the Champions League game against Benfica this week, although it's fantastic to hear that song when the players are lining up, walking through the tunnel and standing, looking at their photo, and it's midweek and the atmosphere is unbelievable and the tifos are up. It's absolutely fantastic and it's great. But something that I was thinking about when I was watching the game was, I want this every single year. We've got to have Champions League every single year. But all of the teams want it. The Premier League has to be our bread and butter. We have got to prioritize getting ourselves up into that top 4. Now, is that going to be at the cost of potentially defending the Carabao Cup or looking at a FA Cup? Let me know in the comments what you think. But I think personally, we've got that silverware hoodoo off of our back. You and I all know that we can win silverware. And it's really good for the fans, and it's a great memory, and it's something that nobody can ever take away from you. Your name is etched into the trophy, and you've got great memories to share with the rest of the fans and family and friends. But the bread and the butter has got to be top 4. It has got to be top 4, possibly top 5. When I was watching Newcastle against Benfica and the Champions League branding and the song and the midweek vibes, the one thing I was thinking about was, we have to have this next season. We have got to have this next season. And it has got to be a huge priority in terms of where the club is going financially, in terms of where it's going in terms of size, in terms of recruitment for players, in terms of keeping existing players. That 14th position for Newcastle in the league is not going to work. We've got to be up there with Arsenal, Man City, Liverpool, Chelsea, Tottenham. Look at the names of these clubs that are already up there. We've still got to go past the Crystal Palaces, the Aston Villas. Man United might have a revival, who knows. Fulham tomorrow at home, it's got to be 3 points and we've got to shoot our way up that Premier League table. So a couple of other news items I just want to speak about in terms of the club in the back of house. Some information coming through regarding the fan advisory board. The minutes have been released from the last meeting. These minutes were released in the last couple of days. The meeting actually took place with Newcastle on the 29th of September, so that was at the end of last month. They've released the minutes or the summary of everything that was spoken about in the meeting. A couple of things to mention in there. Ticketing was huge on the agenda in terms of fans being able to get tickets for games. The balloting system just does not work. That was number 1. Number 2 was the stadium. This for me is the biggest disappointment. No news on the stadium. They just nodded and said, yeah, we know it's a priority. We're making sure that we're taking our time, blah, blah, blah. I don't think we're going to hear anything this season on the stadium at all. To be honest with you, I'm not going to be holding my breath. Although I think it's an absolute priority, or should be a huge priority, to make significant progress. But again, doing it the right way, going through the right process. We don't want to be building tents and then breaking them down like Man United are planning to do. And then the club emblem, they have seen a version of the new club emblem. They have promised fans that we will be able to get to vote on them. They have promised fans that we will get to see images or concepts of what the new club badge is going to be. They confirmed that the earliest the club emblem will be live will be not next season, but the season after. So that's the 27-28 season. They also confirmed that we are not running by Adidas's timelines in terms of manufacturing for shirts. We will take our time, and whenever we are ready, we will make that right decision, which I think is 100% the way to go. I don't think the emblem is, although I don't think the emblem is a huge priority. Yes, it is massively important and it's got so much meaning behind it. But the day-to-day at where we are, getting ourselves up the league, getting ourselves financially healthy and stable, for me is the priority, and I don't think changing the emblem is going to massively impact that one way or the other. And then I want to finish up on 2 final points. Newcastle have, in the last month since I've did my last video, done a sponsorship agreement with Visa. There's been no news about the annual value of that sponsorship. It's just good to know that the commercial teams, and with the new CEO David Hopkinson at the helm, that Newcastle are still looking to generate these deals. Still nothing on the training ground. Eddie Howe confirmed in his press conference today before the Fulham game that work is currently underway at the Newcastle training ground, but there's been no formal news or correspondence or publicity on what that training ground work is. To me, it's absolutely insane that they don't talk about what they're actually doing. It's positive news. It's good news. It's free publicity. Please, Newcastle United, tell us what you are doing. Are you building a new gym? Are you building a cafeteria? Is it a car park? There should be no need for confidentiality or secrecy about this. It's good, positive news. Bring us along on the journey with you. And the last thing, this is a huge bugbear of mine on Newcastle's official website. I've said this in my last couple of videos. Newcastle has still not updated their official website. It still says that Darren Eales is the club's CEO. Now you might think, who cares, whatever, the most important thing is the football. Oh yes, I agree with you 100%. But it takes 5 minutes from somebody in the commercial or the marketing or the IT department. For me, I hate seeing things out of date, and it just smacks of a lack of attention to detail when something is out of date or old news and it hasn't been properly updated. So again, Newcastle, please just update your website and confirm David Hopkinson as the new CEO. But that's it for this video. Good to see you all again. Please do leave your comments in the video about Newcastle's Premier League form. What do you think about Anthony Gordon eventually playing in his rightful position on that left wing, never again as a central striker? What do we think about Johan Wieser? We haven't spoken about him. It looks like he's going to regain his fitness just in time for him to go to AFCON. Does he have his priorities straight? I know Alan Shearer has made a couple of comments about that as well. Let me know your comments about what we should be doing in the Carabao Cup midweek against Tottenham. Should we be playing a full-strength side, or should we be resting players for the West Ham game? Do we have the squad depth, and can we afford to be fighting on all 4 fronts this season, or should we be prioritizing certain competitions over another? Good to see you again. Please do give us a like and subscribe. We are very close to 300 subscribers. It would be great to get there after this video. And also, don't forget,